Hi, and welcome to Impossible Mission, the show where we talk about video games in a way that's guaranteed to piss someone on the internet off. Today we're going to be talking about, well, all of the acquisitions in video games that have been going on recently. Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome to this return episode of Impossible Mission. Today I'm joined by my long-term colleague, Rob Simpson, also of Director's Lottery, the new and improved podcast that talks about all sorts of directors from everywhere around the world.
Yeah, we're kind of very it's changed name because Google is a thing. Google kept on saying that you can't promote gambling. So, shut up, Google. I'm not promoting gambling. Okay, I'll change the name. Shut up, Google. So it's become Directors Uncut now. I've got people from all over Europe, well, not Europe, all over the UK and America to talk to me about movies. So that's fun. That's exciting.
But today you're talking to me about games.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But yeah, you've been a gamer for almost as many years as I have.
I'm not quite as old as you, but yeah, I think when I really fell into gaming, it was like 96. I was dabbled before then, but like PlayStation 1, that was the lights on, oh my word moment, yeah. So it's been a while.
For me it was the decade and a bit previous to that.
Yes, it's not really the same amount of time. Time doesn't work like that, Rob.
Exactly. Now, you and I have talked about this around the years, about all the acquisitions, about the growth of video games and various things like that over the course of years. But recently there's been big changes. Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard, Sony buying Bungie, Tencent buying whoever the hell they can, Embracer Group buying pretty much everybody.
Yes.
You know, and that's just to name a few. That's not to mention all of the companies already bought by EA. Are video games in danger of becoming monopolistic?
Again, you got to stress that again.
Yes.
Because I think a thing which a lot of modern gamers forget. I don't know whether it's because they forgot or because they're all 7 years old. Living up to the name there. In the Nintendo, when Nintendo were first breaking out into the console market with the NES and the SNES, there were 100% a monopoly.
Yeah.
Sega broke that monopoly, but still at that point in games history, it was like, if you want a Nintendo, it's this type of game. If you want a Sega, it's that type of game. And never should the two meet. And it eventually broke out of that with, I think, the PlayStation, essentially what broke that mold. And games industry was free and liberated, and games were all over the place, and the whole third party thing was a thing. But now it seems like it's going backwards.
Yeah,
all of this growing power, it's going backwards to that old status quo.
I mean, that's the weird thing that I find with people who talk about the old days in video games, the 90s in particular. And the main reason I look at it differently is because, for me, Nintendo never really were a monopoly at that time. Not for me, anyway, because I was using other things, other platforms.
There was computers to play games and there was consoles to play games. That's the stressing point that I have to bring up. You were talking about computer games, I was talking about
when you're talking about console games, Nintendo did have a stranglehold, and Sega broke that stranglehold, absolutely. But from my perspective, it was never really a monopolistic thing. Not like we're getting to now.
It's not there, but the signs are happening. And I'm not putting an entire lot of stock in what Jeff Keighley says, because I don't think the sun shines out of his ass like 3/4 of the internet does. But it is true. Higher ups at Sony and Microsoft have said that they're not finished with all of these acquisitions. So
yeah, I mean, it's the same for Take-Two and Embracer and EA and the rest of them. They will be buying up any potential talent that they can get hold of.
Yeah, it's different stances though, isn't it? I think because Microsoft played fast and loose with what they were doing for a long time, they almost gave up the console game because of the absolutely horrific failure of the Xbox One and how it started and Don Matrick. And in the Xbox One generation, they kind of lost all of the IP all I had was Halo, but that wasn't on great form. And then beyond that, it was either Forza or Gears of War, probably others, but not a great deal more than that. So their acquisition strategy has basically been, oh, right, we've got no games, we best buy these stables who are very active in developing new things and give them a lot of money and allow them to create new IPs. So we kind of reinventing ourselves from this really bad position to have a foothold. Whereas Sony and Nintendo for that matter, they've been riddled stupid with IP, riddled stupid with intellectual property and franchises. So Nintendo don't do any buying because they don't care. But Sony, all their acquisitions have been the buying talent, the buying people who they've been working with for a long time. So it's not one rule for everybody, but
No,
it's still changing the industry for the worse, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned Nintendo, right? Because one of the things that struck me about this whole idea of monopolies in video games is that, I mean, we're starting to see it now. Copies of games that have been out before. Rainbow Six Extraction was a recent release from Ubisoft, which a lot of people said played exactly the same as other Rainbow Six games, just with a new skin over it. And we've seen that from other companies that are big in publishing. They've released games that are basically carbon copies of other games. But Nintendo in particular are very guilty of doing the same game over and over again.
Yeah, it's weird the way the industry and the fandom actually looks at that, though, because it's not like, oh, here's another game, which is exactly the same as the other games. Oh, new Mario, cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, new Zelda, cool. Without looking at the fact that this is a very worn formula, which is why I think Mario has to reinvent itself so often. It's basically, I don't know, the Madonna or David Bowie of video games, Mario. It has to be.
I mean, Zelda to a lesser degree, because Breath of the Wild was a very, very big change for the Zelda franchise. The games before that, okay, fine. But Mario in particular, ever since Mario 64, when they basically adopted the 3D version of platforming, all of the Mario games, they might have new gimmicky things in there.
Yeah.
Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario, was it Odyssey or something like that?
I think so, yeah.
The one with all the hats.
Yeah.
Those two games were basically Mario 64 with a few extra bells and whistles.
Yeah, so that's manageable though, because I think they get away with it by the number of first-party Nintendo games being quite thin on the ground.
Yeah.
I don't know, 8 a year, I'd say. They put out really 8 to 10 a year, which is an optimistic year given how they've been recently, but still, that's the sort of thing that they do. The more games you go and put out, the more obvious the formula becomes.
Yeah, and I think, well, that's one of the things. Every game is going to have their niche market. Every game is going to have their fans of that particular game. And when you look at stuff like Rockstar, for example, Rockstar went for however many years with exactly the same formula. The formula did not change from one game to the next.
What do you mean it did not? It hasn't still. It's exactly the same.
Sorry, Guitar Hero, Rockstar, they're all exactly the same.
No, Guitar Hero is exactly the same game. Rockstar is Grand Theft Auto, isn't it? And Grand Theft Auto basically made the same game since 2001.
Do you know the irony is we're talking about different things? I'm talking about Rockstar the game. You're talking about Rockstar the developer.
It's true. Same is true still. You know, it doesn't change a thing.
But yeah, Rockstar have been making the same game for ever since Grand Theft Auto 3. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
2001, 2, something like that. I can't remember precisely, but it's a good old while.
I mean, all they've done really with Grand Theft Auto is put a storyline to it.
Or horses, or bikes.
Yeah,
and call it
change the mode of transport.
Yeah, but what's this got to do with monopolies, though?
Well, when you have a stranglehold over a particular area of whatever, right? One of the problems that you run the risk of, you're going to lose people. People will get bored of what you do.
I don't think it's just that as well. In the case of the acquisitions, I think a lot of people are going to get laid off because you don't need that many staff.
Exactly. If all you're doing is producing copies of copies of copies.
That's a very cynical way of looking at it, but there is a degree of that with these acquisitions. They're going to be... Microsoft have bought up all these studios, and there's going to be studios that are basically making repeats of what other studios are doing. So instead of just having these staff on the cards, just to have them on the cards, there'll be layoffs because there'll be more staff than they can actually use.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why companies like Microsoft and Sony and the rest are buying these small developers and these medium-sized developers and publishers is because of the catalog, right? Let's not make any bones about this.
Well, for Microsoft, it's 100% that, but yeah. I think Sony already have the catalog, so...
Sony have the catalog, but they're still buying companies that have a big back catalog. I can guarantee you, if Sony had the chance to buy Konami or Bandai Namco or any of the other Japanese studios, they would jump at that chance. Just to have access to all of those.
Just on that,
games.
Capcom has said that their main platform going forward is going to be the PC, so I don't think they're available to buy. I think Bandai Namco, they're very buyable, but I think they enjoy their freedom.
Yeah. Koei Tecmo...
Konami, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're fair game.
Well, it depends. Konami might not be as in the shit as we thought originally.
Yes, no, but still, if somebody plops down a big enough check, and says you can still do your stupid pachinko machines, it's going to be, oh wow, this is great. This,
Koei Tecmo, I'm not sure. I think that they're the ones who everyone tends to overlook, which is why they're happily off in the corner doing their own thing, releasing retail games, stuff like that. They're just doing their own thing, and people ignore them. It's
worded another way. When there's less competition, it's bad for the less competition as in all these companies consolidating power and buying more and more. It's bad for the industry in the sense of competition fosters innovation and development.
Yeah.
Look at the wrestling industry, for example. For about 20 years, WWE were without any competition, and they become so stagnant they didn't care because even the crappiest thing that they put out still got millions of people in because there was no other competition. Why bother innovating? Because there's no reason to. We're already rolling in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what happens. I mean, this is before AEW became a thing, but when WWE was on its own, that's what the video game industry is flirting with as a future.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big dangers. The reason why I brought up the back catalogs is because we've seen it with some of the companies that have been bought already. You have announcements of the remake of this game or the remake of this game from like 20, 30 years ago.
Again, a lot of that is on the Microsoft end.
Yeah. Well, some of it's on the Sony end as well. Some of the Sony titles that they announced over the last couple of years were from companies that they purchased, but that had released a game, that had purchased other companies in the past that had a game.
Well, I guess you could talk about the what's it called, the Death Violence car game. I can't remember the name of it.
Carmageddon
or Twisted Metal. Yeah,
Twisted Metal is another one. Yeah,
and there's talk of Wipeout coming back.
Yeah,
but that's just basically you've got IP, use it.
Yeah.
Buy this talent to develop what you've got. Yeah. And I think that's fine. And I think what Microsoft is doing is fine because everything, like Game Pass especially, they have to do that because they're fighting from way, way, way back.
Yeah.
They have to buy these companies because they have the first party titles.
The irony is that there's a possibility that Microsoft and the Activision Blizzard deal might not go through. We'll see what the FTC have to say. But even with that, and this was the head of Microsoft, as in Microsoft in general, not the console side, the game side, not Phil Spencer, the actual head of Microsoft, said in an interview recently that even with the purchase of Activision Blizzard, in terms of the size in video games, just in video games, Microsoft was still third behind Sony and Tencent.
Yeah.
Which is a really weird thing when you think about it, given how much money Microsoft has spent on Activision Blizzard.
How much money they've spent with Bethesda as well, and when the Xbox, just before the Series X and S was announced, or maybe after, I don't know, they announced the buying of all those companies, what's he called, Tim Schafer's company, the name's escaped me, Double Fine.
Double Fine, yeah.
There was whole load of other ones that they bought up. In the space of about 3 years,
yeah,
Microsoft have bought so much.
Yeah.
A ridiculous amount of companies and software. And I don't know, I mean, effectively we've got to get to this point eventually, but it's what's happened to the film industry. The film industry, it's becoming a state now where it's either micro indie, very small indie shop for like £100 million, or it's blockbuster, and there's no middle ground. There used to be like the AA picture where it was like stars in sort of very down-to-earth, humble products, but like the thrillers, the 1990s thrillers, movies like Seven or stuff like that. What's it called? Oh no, the name's gone. Sands of the Lambs, stuff like that from the 90s. There was loads of that. But that sort of movie isn't really there anymore. It's either micro budget or mega blockbuster. And video games are really heading the same way. I don't think a lot of indies will be bought up because they're not really worth it. I don't mean that in a negative sense. There's a lot of indie games are great, but it's sort of like what you'll get for what you put down. I don't think there's a lot of them that are really worth buying. Better just having as independent things within your infrastructure. But yes, it's either indies or AAA.
The irony
That's the way
is,
the industry is. The middle ground, the AA in the case of video games, is gone.
Yeah, and the irony being, I think that's been the case for a number of years now, because if you think back to the days of the PlayStation 2...
Yeah, just on that point though, even indie games are aping AAA now. Yeah. That's how messed up the industry is. Yeah.
I mean, going back to the days of the PlayStation 2, we had any number of just mid-range games that you could just pick up and play and just enjoy for whatever they were. And they experimented with all sorts of things. From PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2, they experimented with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
From PlayStation 3 onwards, though, now I'm using that as a marker for the generations because
they're market leader. They're the market leader.
Exactly.
And a lot of people, when they say games, they just say PlayStation.
Exactly. But from the PlayStation 3 onwards, it seems like innovation just seemed to stop.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of buying up companies it's got a lot of press recently, but it's always been a thing.
Yeah, it's been going on since, I think, mid-PlayStation 3 lifespan.
Yeah, and it's just making games kind of a messy industry.
I mean, one of the things that I know that these companies want to do is to maximize their profits. We all know that's what companies do. It's to maximize the profits.
You look at the acquisition of Bungie. That's not to make anything independent exclusive. That's investment in the future because they want to get the most out of the live service and turn Destiny into a movie or an animated series or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's what Bungie want. They want Destiny to become this big transmedia thing, in the same way that Riot Games is making League of Legends with the release of Arcane and stuff like that. Which all that does is make more money for Tencent because Tencent own 93% of Riot Games.
Yeah, it's messy because the video game industry is the biggest industry in the planet, but it wants to take over other industries too.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the takeover mentality, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Through and through.
And things get even messier when you throw in what Facebook's doing with this whole idea of the metaverse.
Yeah.
Because there's a great video by Josh Strife-Hayes, which is out on the internet. But in that video, he explains what the metaverse is by explaining what it isn't and what people are trying to get you to think the metaverse is, which has already been done in countless video games and other things that are already available.
It's corporate Second Life.
Yeah, it's corporate Second Life, but I mean, he gives an example of how something became newsworthy. It was a wedding, a virtual wedding on the internet became newsworthy. You know, people were talking about this virtual wedding. You're like, hang on, back in RuneScape, back in 1999 was the first virtual wedding when two people, you know, said their vows in a game.
Yeah, it's not virtual. It's going to be virtual reality, but I don't know what term you'd use. But reality within video games or video game structure or software is very, very old. The metaverses has just gone mainstream.
Yeah, and adding virtual reality to it, that's it. But I mean, even in something as recent as Final Fantasy XIV, you have the Ceremony of Eternal Bonds, which is another wedding in a video game.
Yeah,
these things have been done.
Acquisitions, though.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's just a cold can of worms because it's the consolidation of power to smart, like fewer and fewer groups. And when the industry, I mean, you got to work for profit. Every company in every industry has to work for profit.
Yeah.
But I think what this current trend is showing is not an industry wanting more and more profit. It's a company and companies and an industry which is motivated by avarice. You just have to have everything.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why
just on this point, I don't think Microsoft are motivated by benevolence.
No, absolutely not. I agree with you on that. Right. A lot of people are praising Sony with the purchase of Bungie, saying 1 billion of this that we spent on Bungie is to retain staff, right? Yeah. The reason why they want to retain those staff isn't because of kindness. It's because finding talent is hard.
Yeah.
Right? Finding talent who can work on projects that they want to work on is hard. And they want their live service stuff to succeed. So they absolutely need experienced staff from day one so they can hit the ground running, because they want to have at least 10 live service things in the works or released by the end of March 2026, I think it was.
Yeah. From the company being bought's perspective, these acquisitions are very much an act of benevolence because it allows them to continue. It gives them job security. It gives them the ability to plan for the future.
Yeah.
But on the end of the buyer, it's all greed. Yeah. It's all greed, baby.
It is. But that's one of the reasons why I brought up the thing about the metaverse, because one of the things that the metaverse allows them to do is to combine this particular IP with this particular IP, smash them together in the metaverse. Automatically they become connected somehow because of the whole crossover thing, and all of a sudden you can sell this thing to this company here.
You're making me remember Ready Player One, and I think I want
it's
to vomit
exactly Ready Player One.
Everywhere, just everywhere. The internet will be sullied with my vomit.
It's exactly Ready Player One. It is exactly Ready Player One. But the problem is, and this is the other problem you got with this whole idea of kind of a metaverse monopolistic future that we're talking about, is Microsoft will have their own metaverse. But Sony will have their own metaverse like we have right now. Nintendo will have their own metaverse, and everyone else will have their own kind of metaverse type thing. Yeah. There'll be no standardization, there'll be no interconnectivity. So you're right, and all that'll happen is tribalism will become more and more extreme online.
Yeah, and honestly, this is segueing into an episode that we're going to do soon, but it's this sort of thing which has had a huge hand to play in me getting less and less interested in games and pushing me more and more away. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And that is sad.
I mean, the tribalism in games is already, you know, it's already at the level of I don't really want to interact with people when I play a game.
Just on my Twitter, you'd be amazed at how many video game terms I've put in the banned words and the muted words and the blocked accounts. It's all video game related.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how people can become so obsessed. I watch a lot of stuff related to MMOs, and I read a lot of stuff related to MMOs recently. And the amount of toxicity between kind of Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft, mainly from the World of Warcraft side. And this is, right, when I say this, what I'm not using this as a criticism of World of Warcraft players in general, because what's happened is Activision Blizzard has created a game that they've purposefully created to be so toxic that the players themselves don't realize how they're behaving. If you look at it from a psychological perspective, they literally have been trained to disbelieve pretty much anything outside of their bubble.
You mean the WWE philosophy of
Yeah, basically the
growing a fan
WWE.
base?
Yeah, the WWE philosophy. In video games, as a rule, I have never seen a more xenophobic group of fans of a video game than the World of Warcraft players.
Really?
Yeah, they absolutely are xenophobic, and I will probably get a lot of hate from World of Warcraft players for this, but a lot of them are.
Hey, do you want me to wear the stripes of this episode again?
Hang on. As I said, we will talk about games in a way that will piss someone off on the internet. And I'll be honest, World of Warcraft players in general, the so-called hardcore raiding, I've tried playing World of Warcraft. You know what? I found it dull and boring. The hardcore raiding. Be the best. Look at me. Big muscles. Big nuts. Oh, hardcore raider. I don't understand it. You play games to escape.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be fun.
That's at the core of all of this. Video games are increasingly fun.
They're not.
When people are so fixated about, I hope this company buys that company so we can get all their games.
Yeah.
When people are so fixated on the corporate end of the business, corporate end of a passion and interest that they have, I think, this is my last comment, I don't think I can really pick it up from this, but I think the video game industry has lost its joy.
I agree.
Like, the entirety of the industry has lost its joy.
I agree.
You can race that through so many different points, so many different discussions that we could have, and it all comes back to that little statement. Video games have lost their joy and gone corporate.
Yeah.
Simple as that, I think.
And I actually agree, and I think that's a great point to end this on.
Yes. My episodes of Directors Uncut will be coming up here on slow fashion. You've got your episodes of Gosu News. I think you need to explain what that means as well, because that's a bit of a wild name change.
Yeah, it was News Trash. It's now called Gosu News. Gosu basically means, well, highly skilled. It's an ironic name because I'm really not.
If you've seen his B-roll of video games, no, he's not.
No. Many takes later the news comes out.
Yeah. There's also a pop screen as well, which Graham does about pop stars, movies, and all of that lark.
Yes, he's had me on there, and he's made me suffer. He made me do the Star Wars Christmas special.
Yeah. So check out all of the other stuff on the channel. But for this episode of Impossible Mission, where we probably insulted you, so sorry. Probably.
No, you're not sorry. You're not sorry.
No. So yeah, thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next Impossible Mission, wherever and whenever that might be.